Hi everyone, James from Magitone here. I'm in the midst of recording my next drum library. I thought it might be quite interesting to sort of go through the whole process of making the sample instrument, of talking about the idea behind it and kind of the creation of it in kind of a somewhat postmodern move. At the minute, the working title is the Acoustic 808 or AC08. The kind of idea of it stemmed from an April Fool's joke that I did a few years ago. I claimed to have created an 808 drum head. I was making drum heads back then, and all I did with the video is I sample replaced the sound of an 808 snare onto a normal snare. Or at least I found it funny. That sort of set the cogs turning a little bit into thinking like, well, could I actually make an 808 like a real 808? So in my mind, we've got kind of two toolkits to play with here. We've got obviously the drums, like picking the right drum, treating the drum in a certain way, either with muffling or combining drums together, as we'll kind of go into and talk about, but also microphone placement, and especially with things like an 808 kick drum, which has a lot of pronounced low end, proximity effect is going to be quite useful. Probably gone a bit overboard with the microphones, but it's always better to have too many and thin them out than not enough. Alongside this, as a kind of practical point, I think there's a couple of ways of approaching making a drum sample instrument. The first is you set up your drums as a kit and you record it, each drum individually, but you've essentially mic'd it as if you were going to record a song. So that's one way of doing it, and I've done that for libraries like Truck Drums is that, Kensal Drums is that, Kensal Club Date that I just released is that as well. And then there's the other side of that, which is where you kind of separate the drums away from the kit and get a very sort of hyper-focused, hyper-real kind of almost microscopic kind of view of the drum. And that enables you to kind of mic them in a way that would be impractical in a normal kit. With this kind of recreation of a drum machine, I thought that way was kind of the best way to sort of go along, because I'm not really going to be relying on room sound. Although, as it happens, we have got a perfectly usable kind of room tone, and I recorded overheads as well that didn't change throughout, because that will give us some context within the kit. If you record everything super close mic'd, it's going to sound quite unnatural, in my opinion. Obviously, of course, this is all my own opinion. Anyway, let's dive into talking about the kick. It's a Ludwig Vistelite bass drum, and it's a really strange drum. It doesn't sound kind of how you would imagine it to. And I think what happens is that the drum itself cone filters inside the drum because it's very reflective. It's a plastic drum that actually sort of takes away any low end. So I've been sort of experimenting with different head combinations, different muffling, and I stumbled into using an Aquarian Superkick head on it, and then stumbled into tuning it kind of quite high. Normally with bass drums, I kind of go as low as you can go, and it's just this kind of low tone. But with this, tuning it up a bit, I sort of discovered you got this very, to my mind, reminiscent of an 808 sort of thing, that kind of boom kind of thing happening. And so that sounds a bit like this. Now, obviously, we're listening to that with a ton of different mics. I haven't done any kind of mixing or balancing. The final instrument, I haven't quite decided what it's going to be yet, or how it's going to sort of function. We'll get into that as we get going. So there's the Vistelite with a single head, and then another kick drum in front of that to kind of extend the note a little bit, which you can hear there. You can hear the note being extended in that second drum. And in that second drum, I mic'd it with two microphones C451E, both the C451s were the older version, and it says C ducker here, but it's a C juicer, which is a contact microphone inside the drum. I love using contact mics. They're amazing. Not always right, but these are really fantastic. So you hear there's the kind of attack of the note, but there's also just this sustain. So that could be quite useful later when I'm sort of balancing these all together. And then what I like to think of as my kind of context mics. Because obviously we've recorded everything separately, it could sound quite unnatural if you don't have any sort of mics in the same place providing like a constant, in my opinion. So I've recorded an overhead, which is a JZ V76. Sounds like a condenser overhead. Sounds great. I've got an extinct stereo ribbon kind of in this kind of center of the kit, and I've got this in MS pair, so I'm using Dr. MS to kind of decode that. But my plan is on the instrument to have the kind of mid and the side be controllable, so you can either add width or convert back to mono. I love that microphone. It's amazing. And then far rooms were just a spaced pair of Coles 4038s. Not too far away, 12, 15 feet away. What I also wanted to try and do is try and get an octave out of the bass drum. Yeah. Move downwards from the octave, so this will be the highest note, and then it will go down to the octave below. Round robin 1. Right, G1.
It's an unholy amount of low end.
So you can hear the two kind of an octave. And my plan is to have these as an octave of kicks, which I'm really looking forward to. I mean, you know, as anyone who's a fan of an 808, I mean. And then we move on to the snare drum. Now, these two were really the kind of most complex drums. I think when I think 808, I think of kind of three main components that are really a kind of thumbprint of that instrument. I think of the kick drum, I think of the snare drum, and I think of the hi-hats. So a lot of attention was paid to sort of really getting those in that sort of wheelhouse. Right, so top mic. So with that mic, Sennheiser 441, you can really hear just the attack of the drum. You don't hear the body. And then we've got the shell. Snare bottom, which is the JZ V11. And then, mainly because we had them, I thought, well, what happens if we put a sub kick in there? So that was behind the stool, and then there was one underneath the snare, which gets that kind of tone, which is quite nice. Another 451 on top, C juicer inside the shell. Probably not going to use that. Overhead again. Sounds great. So when I record samples, I always tend to record a little bit of music, or music, some kind of performance, like a 2-bar phrase, because when it comes to applying EQ and processing and things, it's impossible to do it if you're just hitting a single note. It's just really, really difficult. So I'll always tend to just record a couple of bars at the end of, you see here, I've got all of the round robins and the velocity layers, and then I just play a little bit on there, just so when I come to it later, I've got the ability to kind of witness it in some kind of context. And I recorded this with a couple of different types of muffling as well. So that was with no dampening. So you hear that kind of top note a little bit. I don't know, we'll see where we get to. And then we recorded some cross stick, but we recorded this on a 14-inch drum because you can't do it on a 6-inch drum. I recorded this at Big Fig Studios in Buckinghamshire, and Jake had this absolutely massive marching stick called a Jojo Quantum 2000. We tried it. It was too much stick for me. So I switched back to my normal 5As. Sounds great. Then we come on to toms. So these really were just kind of straight up muffled concert toms, albeit recorded with 13 mics. So we've got 4 toms. So there's a little kind of 8-inch, 10-inch, 13, and a 16. So I'm going to do a little bit of tidying up of those and clean them up a little bit and maybe work to get that kind of synthy tone out of them. I will be putting like an attack and release knob on them so you can kind of treat them almost like kind of synth tones a little bit, and some tuning as well and all that good stuff. And then the congas, and I muffled them and hit them with a mallet because I think that got the kind of closest to the sort of sound that I was hearing, quite a dull attack. And then we come on to the percussion. So again, same mics really throughout, same overheads and stuff like that. So yeah, we've got the clave or clave, maraca, and what we've all been waiting for, the cowbell. And then the next one, obviously when planning this, I had a full, spreadsheet, and I spent months kind of playing around with this idea and working out what bits of my gear I could sort of manipulate into sort of getting this sound. And the one sound that I had the biggest difficulty with was the hand claps. I couldn't work out how to get hand claps. I was checking out that Istanbul Agop thing that Trevor Lawrence designed, the kind of clap stack thing. Super cool. And then, so I sort of messed around with loads of different cymbals and things. And then I just remembered that I do actually have hands. And Jake also has hands. So we used our human hands. Yep. I don't know why we didn't think of that before. 2, 3, 4. So I'm probably going to layer those up a little bit and get that really kind of, maybe giving the option of thinning it out or having more hand claps, maybe adding a sort of delay on things, to make it seem like there's tons of people or less people. Now, cymbals. I had some little tiny hi-hats made by the great cymbal maker Dave Collingwood with a kind of intention of getting a processed electronic sound, which they do. It wasn't quite right for that 808 tone. It didn't help I was playing them with a barbecue skewer to get a very thin sound. Ride cymbal, which is a little 12-inch bell, which I think has that kind of like boo kind of thing that the 808 cymbal has. And then the cymbals themselves, I took a bunch of different cymbals, but what I ended up using almost entirely actually for the whole cymbal setup was kid cymbals, as in like the cheapest, nastiest cymbals. I mean, you used like, I don't know, $4,000 worth of microphones on a £5 cymbal, and they sound pretty cool. And there's a little one as well. Yeah. And then as we sort of draw into a close, ended up trying a different pair of hi-hats. So this is a kid cymbal on top, 12-inch kid cymbal, and actually the ride cymbal underneath. And I think it's really close. Again, played with a barbecue skewer, because the stick is just a little bit kind of too heavy almost, in a way. I mean, this is what I love about sampling. You know, if I was playing a kit, I could never play a kit where I've got a barbecue skewer when I play the hi-hats. I'm playing with a stick on the snare, mallets on the toms, stick on the cymbal. You know, that wouldn't... I can't juggle that well, you know. But I can put it in samples. Yeah, I mean, that's as a good a place as any to kind of leave it. But that is pretty good representation. Now, obviously, as we go along, I'm going to edit all of these down. Probably not going to be this many mics. I think, as it stands, each of the instrument will probably have a set of close mics that I've sort of balanced together to draw certain tonalities out of it. The overhead microphone, the MS pair, and then the room microphones. So you're going to get a lot of options with things alongside the things that you would normally find on an 808, like being able to pitch it differently, attack and release, things like that. So I'm super excited about this, and the instrument is going to be released on the 8th of August, obviously. So I've really got to stop procrastinating and get on with it and get it done. So there's going to be more videos in this series. I'm not quite sure who in the world wants to watch me edit samples or even watch me rename samples, but it might be useful, it might be interesting. So I'm going to do it. So thanks very much for watching. And yeah, don't forget, you know, if you're into this, please like and subscribe, and see you at the next video.